Okay.
The first thing I want to say about New Zealand, if you thought Canadians were friendly, then wow, you should meet the New Zealanders. This trip kind of started when we had an Evergreen visit from one of your Evergreens in New Zealand, Jeanette Boswell. And she said, oh, if you ever come here, you must stay with me. I'll help you out. And let me tell you, she was my first introduction to let me help you out, which happened again and again and again there. She said, what would you like to see? And she literally planned out 4 days with us and drove us for 4 days straight. So that's how friendly New Zealanders are. So she's an Evergreen member. Just some things to help you get to New Zealand. Qantas Airline has something called an Aussie Pass. And basically what it is your flight to, even though it's Australia, but New Zealand's included, and you can add 3 or 4 cities onto that for free. So if it's 1,300 round trip, it's 1,300 including those 3 or 4 cities.
Because the only way to get around, especially Australia, is to fly.
So that's one really reasonable way to do it. And the other thing is getting around New Zealand. They have an interesting bus company, which is if you took like Greyhound that goes from city to city to city, and it married Trafalgar, which does escorted tours. So basically you can go from city to city, but that quote Greyhound bus tour guide is going to tell you what you're seeing along the way.
Actually, the bus driver becomes a tour guide.
And stops at all the high points.
And he lets you get out and take pictures.
And then if you go to a city, you don't necessarily have to follow a certain schedule. If you like it, you stay 3 more days and then just take the bus 3 days later. So Great Sights is the touring part of it, and Intercity is the bus company. It's all the same company. And the iSight, which Stan has up there, are the information people in each of the cities all over New Zealand, and they are
amazingly helpful.
Okay. So you talked about ice cream, you talked about food. So I'm going to talk about the thing you shouldn't miss and eat in New Zealand. How did you know that, Kathleen? The first thing, Hokey Pokey ice cream is a vanilla ice cream with little toffee bits, and it's kind of their national ice cream, and it is wonderful. And the Kumara is a sweet potato. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but do you have the picture of the cookies? That should be the first picture. Okay, so there were 2 food pictures. Okay, so Anzac cookies, ANZAC. It's an oatmeal cookie that was developed in World War II for the Army Corps. So that stands for.
We're not seeing cookies.
I know he forgot the picture. So there's 2 pictures of food, but I don't think he put them in.
Okay.
So they're developed for the Army Corps so they could travel with them in World War II, wherever they were. And they were hard, but they softened up when you eat them, and they're absolutely delicious. Kind of a coconut oatmeal taste. It stands for Australia, New Zealand Army Corps. That's where they get the word Anzac. Pavlova is, and that's the other picture you're missing. It's a famous cake that's made out of meringue and fruit and whipped cream. And believe it or not, Jeanette made one for us when we stayed at her house. That was amazing. And then, okay, so that's it. And then the other thing I want to mention, did you put the bakeries in with all the pies? No, okay. One of the things that makes it very reasonable to travel from city to city is they all have what kind of look to us like little English bakeries with those little meat pies, chicken pies, savory pies. And they were great to grab, if you're traveling during the day or bus tour or anything. They're really reasonable and really yummy. So the pie shops are in every little town. This is our beginning day. This is what introduced us to what New Zealanders were like.
Yeah. We landed in Auckland, and this is the airport.
We see this whole ceremony happening with people dancing.
Down in the bottom right, you see the ceremony. It
turned out the family was welcoming back a son who had gone on a Christian mission to Fiji. And this was the whole ceremony, and everyone in the airport kind of stood around and watched it. And we, of course, stayed longer and talked to them. And they invited us back to their house. And this kept happening over and over again. And that's just, we never did go because we were busy with Jeanette, but we would have gone if we weren't going to be staying with her. So the second thing is when we were in Auckland, we traveled across to, I don't know if it's an island, it's across the bay. Do you have the Arataki Visitor Center?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to show you right now. We landed in Auckland and basically we made our way slowly all down to the bottom to
So
Wellington.
New Zealand has two islands, a North Island and a South Island. So we started on the North Island.
This is the North Island.
Because it's easiest in world travel to land in Auckland, which is there. Is it the main city?
That's the main city, right?
Okay.
The biggest city.
Okay, so this is the Arataki Visitor Center, and basically that post is a guardian of the center, and the Watakari. My pronunciation of all these words are going to be awful, and they're probably wrong, but I'm doing the best I can. And it's free to go in, and you learn all about the area and a bit about the people. And the thing we learned there, the first time we heard the word weta. I don't know if anyone's ever heard that word, W-E-T-A. And do you have the next one? So this outside is a little weta, what we say, hotel. So it's a wooden thing that opens and closes, and the wetas can go live there. Did you take, I don't know, you can't really see it, but there's.
On the right side, you can.
There's a shadow of Stan, but above his hands is a kind of a weta bug.
You can see the bug there.
And there's one up on top there.
Right.
Do you have the one inside the center? The actual one? Okay.
No.
So the weta is a famous bug because I gotta read this. They're so old, they've outlived the dinosaurs. So they were round when the dinosaurs were here. They've hardly changed in 100 million years, and they're among the heaviest insects in the world, and there are about 100 different varieties of weta in New Zealand. So it's kind of their national bug. The other reason to go here is to see the kauri trees, K-A-U-R-I. They're endangered, and they're the very special tree to New Zealand. In this area, we climbed through this whole forest to see as many of them as we could. Is this the top? Okay.
That's the tree.
Okay, so you climbed to what I thought was, they told us go to the cathedral. So I thought I was going to see a cathedral, but it was a cathedral of the trees reaching for the sky. And this is the silver fern. This is a symbol of New Zealand. I don't know if anyone has seen it on New Zealand things and on their sports teams. And it's been their symbol since the 1880s. To the Maori people, the shape stood for strength, resistance, and power. To the other New Zealand, it exemplifies their homeland because it grows everywhere on the North and South Island. And as a souvenir, we brought sports home with ferns on them. So we think of New Zealand.
Also, if you look at my shirt, there's a New Zealand fern right there.
Yeah, so you're going to find it on everything, and that's the symbol there. Next, we went into the city to the Auckland War Museum, and it has the largest collection of Maori and Polynesian artifacts. So this is an ornately carved Hatunui meeting house from 1878. And then nearby is a famous canoe, a waka, war canoe. It's called Te Taki Tapiri, and it was from 1836. Yeah. And this is the heart and soul of the museum, this area of all the Maori stuff, but there's all national, also history stuff there, and fauna, and the moa bird, which is a bird found in New Zealand.
Now you'll see up in the corner here, at the top right, those statues, and it's the same one on that big totem pole. Those are Maori people. It's always they carve their images always in the same way.
Just like we would have the totem poles here in North America.
And for some reason, they carve a lot of their images with the tongue sticking out.
Okay, we'll get to that
and
later.
You'll see that soon.
Yeah. Okay, so next we're going into the art museum. So there's history, there's art, there's everything in New Zealand. And this, I'm only showing you this picture. They have a really famous artist who I'd never heard of, and I'd studied art. His name is Colin McCahan. And so there's an exhibit in the art museum of his work from his first works, which are this one in around 1964. And he was a driving force in New Zealand. He helped start this gallery and taught art and painted, and very, very famous. I never heard of him. And then people go there as well because in this museum, they have the famous Toi Otamaki, which are the living portraits of the Maori tribal leaders. So the next one is the portrait, and you could see all the tattooing on his face, and each of them had a different tattoo pattern on their face. All the portraits, or most of them, were done by Gottfried Lindauer in the late 19th and early 20th century. And the next one is actually a painting of a tattoo artist at work. And only the most important tahunga, or the tattoo artists, are allowed to create the facial tattoos. This work is being done on a porch while a young tribal leader lies on a wariki, and his head rests on the lap of the tahunga while his hands are clenched in obvious discomfort. The other gentleman is also a tahunga, and he's chanting rituals for safe and successful completion of the pawaha, which is the facial designs. So this was particularly interesting to show how it's done. So we go from the sublime to the ridiculous, because the next thing is the big belly solar rubbish bin. And we love the humor and the joy of New Zealanders. And this is one of their cool rubbish bin, which compacts the garbage and tells the contractor when it's full, so they know when to come and empty it. And we could sure learn from them. Then from there, we went on to the Zeelong Tea Estate. And anyone who wants to learn anything about tea, so the left are tea, there's a tea sculpture garden, which is free to go to, or you can pay to go into the tea estate, have tea there. The sculpture garden, this is a long teapot dragon. And the next one on the right,
the tails all the way through.
the next one on the right is Stan helping some of the tea workers up the tea, like the way they used to do it, for hundreds of years. After this, we went into the Maori region, which you might have heard the word Rotorua. And so this is the area of their land. And the one, how would you call it? I guess you say a tourist attraction we went to see is, okay, you got to hold this one. Wakariwarawa.
Wakarewa.
Okay, he's got it.
Wakarewa.
And the Maoris still run the area. They still live on the area.
They live in there.
So right here is the Old Faithful of New Zealand. So Yellowstone isn't the only one that has one. And this is the Kora Tio Old Faithful. And then they have geysers all over this particular land. And they use it for all kinds of things. So in the next one, this is our guide who threw some corn of the cob into the Parakahura, the largest mineral pool. And then Mother Nature cooked it. And in 8 minutes, lunch was ready. And so they use the pools for cooking. They use the pools for bathing. They soak in mineral pools. And in this area, you could tour around their meeting houses, their school. And of course, always is going to be the cultural dancing at the end. So there we are. And this is where you can see one of the Maori with his tongue sticking out, which we have a different impression of what that means. For them, it was a kind of a war symbol that they were trying to scare away the other people. So all of their dancing involves sticking their tongue out, and then you get to join in the cultural performance as we did here. After that,
now this whole village is an actual village. People are living there, and you're walking around their houses.
You're seeing the kids and the parents and whatever. The thing we didn't do in this area that's very popular is taking a mud bath in those mineral pools. And the reason I didn't is because I read online that your bathing suit gets so smelly from it that you have to really throw it away afterwards. So we decided to skip that part, but you can do that there. It's very popular. So Maori, a meal, like a famous meal you would have there, and you would pay probably $75 a person to eat it, is called a hangi. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that one right either. It's. Can you show the next picture?
It's one of those meals that you dig a hole and you cook it in the hole.
Okay, you would traditionally cook it in a pit in the ground, and you would put in a fish or chicken or root vegetables.
No, you're out of order. 1 second.
Okay, do you have the picture of it, or we'll find it? Well, maybe we'll come across it after.
We will.
Okay, so,
One second.
so
I'm trying to go
our friend
backwards.
Jeanette had someone in her condo area cook one for us, and you'll see pictures of it later.
It doesn't want to move. 1 second. Let me just see.
Okay, just don't go back and forth. Go where we were.
I know. I'm trying to get to, oh, okay. Arrow keys stopped working.
Anyway, so we, the
Now,
meal
this is sort of an overview of the back of the village.
that we were
And-
just
And you can
in.
see it's in the middle of all the mountains.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I just took one picture, and I don't know if this is the one. Every single, okay,
Now, we're in.
yeah,
we're into-
that was to also show that everywhere you go in New Zealand, north, south, east, west, up or down, is a gorgeous picture moment. There's just everywhere's water, everywhere there's mountains, everywhere there's green. At the very end, I'm going to do 10 in a row. I just didn't do them all the way through. We went on, for those of you who love gardens, the Hamilton gardens are free and they're spectacular. There's many kinds of gardens: English garden, Italian Renaissance garden, a Maori garden, Japanese garden, Tudor garden. And this one is the Indian charbag garden, which invokes the floral colors of an intricate Indian rug. And then the next one I think I did was the Tudor garden, because the English aristocracy were fascinated by intricate geometric patterns. So this particular garden represents that. And you can see that little, on the pole, there are griffins and dragons and centaurs and unicorns and whatever in this garden. It was beautiful there. And I'm not a garden person. It kind of wowed me. The next thing we went to was Jeanette found a local Maori neighborhood gathering. So when you move away from the area and you live in a little town somewhere and you want to keep up your culture, they meet every week and they invited us. This is again the kindness and niceness of the New Zealanders. So they invited us to one of their social circles, and we got to make, can you show this?
Yep.
We got to make these toy
Yeah.
balls,
Yeah.
which were,
I don't know how many of them you can see this,
okay,
but if you're looking at the speaker view, I'm there.
okay.
We can see it very well.
Yeah,
Okay,
Okay.
so the balls are attached to long strings. They're swung rhythmically, one in each hand. Today, the women dancers perform it. So we saw that in the cultural show. The men used it for strength and coordination, as they were also used as weapons during
It keeps
battle.
going back.
It's really hard to do. We got to sing along with the kids and their grandparents, and it was a wonderful moment. So if you're there, look them up, when you're in a town nearby.
Right in front and with the black sweater is Jeanette.
Okay, so
Okay.
then
What's in the bags?
Oh, you mean in these little? I mean,
we just
it's
stuffed them with a stuffing that you would have in a stuffed animal.
And then
Oh,
when they dance and sing,
They
you throw them around.
You have to learn how to spin them. It's hard to do.
okay.
So we took a bus from this area back down to Wellington. And on the way, we passed Otorahanga, which is this corrugated iron sculpture town. So there are buildings, lampposts, giant sculptures everywhere. It was just incredible. The other thing we did in the area was we went to the famous Watomo glowworm caves. This means that you are on a boat, on water, going through a cave silently, and it's totally black in there.
Now, you're not allowed to take pictures inside, so I don't have a picture of the inside, but you're talking about, you're looking up at the top and there's thousands of little glowing dots. Those are the glowworms.
In the entire cave. So this is also one of the highlights that people want to do when they go to the North Island. And you have to be silent, so you can't disturb them by taking pictures or talking. So it's quite a moment. It's quite spectacular going through.
By the way, Sandra, What month is this that where you went?
That was a great question, because whenever we travel, the first thing we do is we look up the weather and we decide our trips based on the weather. So we were told to go in October or April. So we were gone for 6 weeks. So we left on October 1st.
Yeah, this is October.
We should
Okay.
have done, okay, we did New Zealand first and Australia second. I would do it the other way around for temperature wise, because by the time we got to Uluru in Australia, it was really hot. So I would have do it, but we did it because we had to fit into Jeanette's travel schedule. So we did it for her. When we got to Wellington, we stayed with, I believe, another Evergreen. It might have been the other travel club. But he insisted on getting up in the morning and taking us into town to the old bank arcade, which we would not have found out about, to see, which looks like it's just a fixture hanging from the ceiling, but it actually opens up and it's a
Every
musical.
hour on the hour.
It's a musical clock, and a French horn plays and a narrator recalls a story, and as it opens up and
you can see there's a
turns.
story playing right on the
Yeah.
glass.
We wouldn't have known about it if he hadn't taken us there. It reminds you to stop for a moment and think about all that happened in that place you're standing on, because it kind of tells the history of the town. Next, we went to Parliament in Wellington, and it's a free tour.
And I
You have
got there.
to sign up ahead of time. And yes, he ran for office, and he was expounding in Parliament. This, you don't even have to take the tour because this is right in the lobby. So if you want the photo op, you can just go in. And the other thing that we learned about from Jeanette, this is where the Evergreen experience is so important. She told us about wow. Now, I'd never heard this wow word. And what it is Wellington is the home of the World of Wearable Art Show. Every October, the entire city turns into one big, it's like Madison Square Garden, some huge place that has shows of all people doing insanely crazy wearable art. This one on the left is done by Julian Herzog, and he was a guy who was an engineer. He was in real estate. He pilots planes. He races sailboats. And then he went into wearable art. This was made out of sheet metal. And it was made out of anything and everything. We actually saw a car that was wearing
Right.
a dress. It was quite interesting. We couldn't get tickets. We didn't know ahead of time. And Jeanette did everything she could to get us tickets, but it was okay. Next time we'll go see it. In Wellington is sort of the big museum of New Zealand. It's called Te Papa, and it has the history of the country. This is the Treaty of Waitangi. If you can imagine this, it's a
Whoops.
document that was signed by the British Crown right after they landed, I don't know how soon after, and 500 Maori chiefs. Can you imagine landing in a place and making a deal with 500 different tribes? I can't even begin to understand how that happened.
And these are all the signatures of the 500.
All of them. So it was in Maori and it was in English, and we understand that it was interpreted differently, but they did get along and they didn't have a war. And eventually it turned out okay. After we left Wellington, we near the airport is a place called Weta Workshop, which is the Disney of New Zealand. And if you've heard of movies like Lord of the Rings and Avatar and Hercules and Xena the Warrior Princess, they were all created at the Weta Workshop. If you want to do a tour, you have to book ahead. There's 4 or 5 different tours, which were pretty amazing. The place is not large, it's easy to get around. And then after this, I think we have the Hobbit feet and Bilbo's legs, which were there in the museum. James Cameron was so very taken with the studio in New Zealand that he bought a home in the area, and other Hollywood actors and actresses, I found it a safe place to live, so they're moving there, and I can understand why. From here, we flew across. You can take a boat across from one island to the other. It takes about 8 hours with the boats and buses. But we flew across to the southern island, and Christchurch is the major city there that we flew
You
to.
can see this is at the top is Wellington. So we flew straight down to Christchurch.
It's a really easy walkable city.
And just we roamed around through the mountains into
The fjord land,
and then up into the mountains over here.
into the Southern Alps.
Right.
And then this straight line this, can you show them the
Yeah.
straight line that goes straight across?
Yeah.
Was one of the famous train trips of the world, and I'll mention that as we get there. We took the train across. We were going to stay within Evergreen, and this again just tells you the amazing wonderfulness of it. She said, yeah, she wasn't going to be around, but we could still stay at her place. And she said she was going to tell us where the key was and just leave the money under her pillow and go and come as we like. As it turned out, it didn't work out because she had to give the house to someone whose house burned down. So we wound up staying at this pod hotel, which was much better because it was right in the center of town. It was $65 for the night. And this is the entire room. So where you're standing here, you're actually at the door. So the entire room is a bed, kind of like a ship. It was really comfortable. There was on the left, there is a shower and a bathroom, and
You're looking at a mirror.
right.
It looks
You
bigger
can see us
because of the
standing there.
because of the mirror.
Yeah. So it ends right at the end of the bed. It
But-
was perfect because it was right in the center of town,
And everything in Christchurch was walkable right from
right
that
from that
hotel.
hotel. So it was right near the bus depot. You could walk to, the Riverside new food court. We walked to a Friday food truck market. And then we walked to something you might have heard of, anyone who's ever heard of the Cardboard Cathedral, the Transitional Cathedral. In February 2011, there was a devastating earthquake. You might have heard about that in Christchurch. The original Neo-Gothic cathedral collapsed, and the whole cathedral fell like just a plate shattering into pieces. After that, they found a Japanese man named Shigeru Ban, who had created a cardboard church after the Kobe quake. So they invited him to come and build this building, and the entire building is made out of
If
cardboard.
you look at the two tall sides, those are all cardboard pipes.
That's the wood part. The brown is the wood part. So cardboard, local wood, steel, and polycarbonate roof. And it's got a cement floor there. So it's totally amazing. It's still there since 2011. It's free to walk through. After that, we went in town. There's the Canterbury. Every town has a museum. The Canterbury Museum has a huge collection of moa bones. I mentioned those birds earlier. And they have a Hall of Antarctica, Norwegian Roald Amundson's adventures.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And everyone goes to see this, which is Fred and Myrtle's Paua, P-A-U-A shell house. So they collected this particular shell, and their entire house was decorated in it, and they took the whole house in pieces and put it together in the middle of this museum. Absolutely amazing.
Excuse me, are those turtle shells?
No,
Or-
they're P-A-U-A shells. That's the name of whatever sea creature it was.
It's the pupa shells.
There's one
I
turtle
was-
shell. There's one turtle shell by the fireplace. And there's some other shells on the fireplace stone on the floor, but the rest of the house with this other kind of shell. Anyway, it was
Someone started asking a question?
okay.
No.
Anyway, again, very walkable. We stayed in Christchurch, and then we left on this spectacular ride, the best ride of my life, from Queenstown, from Christchurch to Queenstown. Again, this is part of this, I mentioned earlier, the bus tour thing. So this is where we started the bus thing. And so we took it first to Christchurch, to Queenstown. So what you're going to see here is now 10 pictures of some of the vistas of what we saw on this one bus tour. So Stan's just going to flip through a whole
I
bunch
think
of
they're not all
slides.
here. They're
I did 10 of them. Okay.
you can see the view. Really amazing.
This is a mirrored lake there.
No, the lake comes later, I think.
So what you're passing by is the Canterbury Plains and glacier-fed Lake Tekapo, the Southern Alps, the Aroaki, Cloud Piercer, Mount Cook, which is a World Heritage Site.
I think what we're looking at here is something called the Seven Sisters, which are 7 big ski hills. And we're on the other side of them.
Okay, so the bus went from Queenstown, I keep saying it wrong, from Christchurch to Queens. Are you still doing?
No, we're at the
Okay,
fjord.
all right. So from Queenstown, we took a day trip to Milford Sound, which is a fjord. And honestly, everybody talked about this for so long. It's one of those things like when you go see a Broadway show and you say, oh, that wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. Because the day before, that trip on the bus was so spectacular. So the fjord was like,
You know,
it was
we just basically got on a boat into the middle of the
the
fjord.
fjord and came back, and we saw this waterfall and we saw
waterfalls.
some seals, or I don't remember what kind.
This
This
is
is
what-
the fjord.
This is what you're looking at in the fjord.
Some people stay overnight, and these are just pictures that you see every day as you're going from in this.
Whoops.
Okay, so you can stop there. There's sheep everywhere in
Whoops.
there's sheep everywhere. First, the trip to Milford Sound, we also went to Te Anu, the Eglinton Valley. We saw an ancient alpine beach forest, waterfalls, the Mirror Lakes, and the sheep everywhere. There are no animals that are indigenous to New Zealand, none, zero. They only came after the Europeans came over on their ships, and they brought the sheep, the horse, and the cow. The other thing that's wonderful about it is people love to go camping in New Zealand because there's also no bugs,
And there's no snakes.
no snakes. So you can camp overnight. You don't need a bug net. You don't have to worry about mosquitoes. You don't have to worry about any of that. No bugs anywhere. So
Well, what about the weta bugs?
I don't know if they just sort of hang out on the trees, but no, we never saw
They
them
don't bother
anywhere.
people.
You know,
Maybe they eat all the other
Well
bugs.
behaved.
we never
Yeah.
saw them anywhere.
They have
Okay.
those little flies, like little sand flies we have here. They have those little flies and they really bite.
Yeah, we didn't see them there. We saw them in Australia, and we had to wear bug hats in Australia, but in New Zealand, we never
We
saw.
never even had
Well,
to
not
take,
in October, which
Yeah.
is their, it's their
It's their spring.
their spring. So
Yeah.
what, maybe we weren't there at the right time, which is why we went at that time. Queenstown is where we landed up in from Christchurch. It is one of the prettiest towns because it's one of those towns where you have mountains on one side and you have a
oh,
lake.
there's more,
This,
some more of these.
this is Stan and I always take a kissing picture all over the world. So
This
we
is
wanted to
in
take,
front of Mount Cook.
yeah, so that was,
That's Mount Cook on the right.
and those are the Southern Alps. So we're still
Oh.
on that tour day here. And I'm not sure, was this once we got back? So Queenstown is
We're-
just, yes.
okay, this-
Queenstown, so you have this gorgeous mountain view. At the same time, you have a lake. You have
Oops.
botanical garden there, which was the
Yeah, this
purple
is-
flowers.
This is from Queenstown looking out across the lake.
So you want to spend a couple of days here. We did the tour from there. It's really a very cool town. So you have
Yeah.
a lot of young people there, very touristy. They're camping, they're hiking, they're climbing.
One of the
Very
things,
walkable.
one of the things, can you see, there's this hole in
There's-
the mountain all the way up.
There's a
and at-
funicular,
At the very top is,
Bob's Peak.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the mountains there are called the Remarkables. You
so
can
there's a
climb.
restaurant / pub at the top.
There's
people go
a
to.
1 mile creek trail. You could watch paragliders. It's just a pretty small little walkable town. Very, very pretty. We really enjoyed staying there.
Never enjoyed eating
Okay.
there.
So what I'm eating here is called a Fergie burger. The burgers in New Zealand are a lot of them are lamb burgers. Why? With all those lambs around. But what we loved about them is they're dressed, the typical sauce you would put on is aioli, which for those of you who don't know is kind of a garlic mayonnaise. And this thing was drippy, you see me eating over the table. It was wonderful. This Fergie burger next door had a Fergie gelato shop and a pastry shop, so you could have your whole dinner in pieces. And you're right near that water, so you could take, most people took the burgers out and had picnics all around town. And that was really yummy. We had lamb burgers, in a few different places. Oh, and there was that one lamb dish I just remembered. Okay, so next is some New Zealand humor. That was a bathroom, which we thought was kind of funny. So now that we were in the fjord land where the fjord was, and from there we took a bus up to Greymouth. So you're going through glaciers and New Zealand's highest mountain and lowest glacier, Fox Glacier, Franz Josef Glacier. It was just another one of those gorgeous rides. So this is, okay, now when you get up to the top, I don't understand this at all, but there's a rainforest in the middle of all these mountains. So we actually stayed in something called the Rainforest Retreat, which was one of the least expensive places to stay there. And it was a perfectly pretty place. And ours actually looked out at the rainforest, our window. So, you know, for the least amount, you got sort of the best view. And then what we did is we took the train back to Christchurch. It's called the Transalpine Great Rail Journey.
Now, the reason I'm showing this
is because of the rains and because of the mountains, you always have to be conscious of rock slides. So
our train, we couldn't take it from where we needed to take it
At Greymouth.
because the rock slide covered the tracks and they had to cancel the train.
So just in case you ever go and this happens, we found out that we could get half our money back. So they took us a bus about a quarter of the way down. We got on another station, and then it was totally narrated, just like the bus. So everywhere you went on the train, you knew exactly what you were seeing and what to look for. And then if you go on the train, we just found out, and you should know, we were given a thing for money, a coupon to eat on the train, but you have to do it when you first get on the train because that restaurant closes early. So do it and get your food and sit down and relax and enjoy this beautiful trip through snow-capped mountains and glacial lakes and rainforests and just another gorgeous part of New Zealand. From there, we took the train back to Christchurch, and then we flew on to Sydney. So that was the end. And the only thing I wanted to say, which has not much to do with New Zealand, is the way I organize my trip when I'm writing it, because there's so many cities and places, I put each city in a different color type in my notes. So each city, when I want to look for it, one's purple and one's orange and one's red and it's green, so I can zip through my notes really quickly to find the city I'm looking for. So, and when I travel and I have this printed thing with me in all different colors.
Well, that's a good idea. Well, we have quite a few questions, so let me start at the beginning. Let's see. Oh, did you see any New Zealand fantail birds?
Oh, birds are everywhere. I think that was one of our biggest surprises in New Zealand and Australia, that everywhere you hear bird song, everywhere you go, there's birds flying.
And they're loud. You hear loud bird songs everywhere.
Everywhere. I think that was the biggest surprise. Just not how noisy, but in busy cities and wherever we are, you don't hear bird song. So it was a delight all through both countries.
So were the birds indigenous where maybe the animals weren't,
Yes.
birds were?
Yes.
Lots of them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. From Jackie Sewell, Sean Gardwood is an amazing artist who lives in Nelson. Is that the artist you had mentioned?
No,
No.
his name was McMahon or something.
McMahon.
Okay. Well,
Mick Kahan, Colin
McCahan.
McCahan.
okay.
But
So
there's
maybe
a lot of famous artists that we don't know here because we haven't learned about their culture enough.
sure. Okay, so Jack had written, did you see any weta bugs in the wild? And so you
Nothing. Never saw a bug,
No.
not in New Zealand. Oh, in Australia, lots.
I'd like that.
Yes, it was comforting. You never had to worry. You have to put on bug spray every day and
In Australia, it felt like Venice, Italy, because we would walk, not in New Zealand, but on the Australia side, you'd walk into a wild area with a lot of birds and suddenly there's a parrot sitting on my head. You hold out
Yes.
your hands with food and you end up with food.
Where was it?
Parrots and different birds just landing on you all over the place.
Where was it you saw all the little birds on the
Oh.
wires? It doesn't matter, but tell them the story.
No,
Oh,
that
okay.
was
India. Okay, go
India.
ahead.
No, in India, one of the things that I never knew,
Parakeets.
we were coming home back to our hotel, and I always had a parakeet as a kid, and I just recognized this parakeet song, and I look up, and there's along the electrical wires for miles, thousands and thousands of parakeets.
And it was kind of that way in New Zealand, Australia, where we just saw birds on every place we went.
Wow. Well, that probably keeps the insects down too.
Right.
I mean, otherwise, what do they eat? What do the birds eat if not insects?
Ah, that's a good question.
Seeds.
Seeds. Okay, let's see. So somebody said were the shells similar, the ones that were on the wall, to abalone shells?
Yeah, because they were pretty blue and brown, and they were very iridescent.
Okay, so then Jack wrote PAUA
Right.
is the USA, in the USA are called abalone.
Oh,
Okay.
so there you go. Yeah.
Are the sharks well behaved too? We were talking about something being well behaved. So I assume you didn't go into any waters.
Oh, well, yeah, we did the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and there were no sharks that day.
Okay. Did you eat any deep fried kiwi fruit?
No, the had kiwi was on the pavlova. This deep fried wait bit. There's a fish that's very famous. A white bait fritters. That's really popular there. But I'm allergic to fish, so I didn't have any.
Okay. So Beth Pavolino wrote, I was on a trip to New Zealand and saw weta bugs in the wild. I did a 12-day birding trip in the North Island.
That would be spectacular. Yeah.
Wow. Have to see maybe if Beth has some pictures from that. That might be another program.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Did you happen, this is from David in California. Did you happen to visit a New Zealand winery?
No, we didn't, because we don't really drink a lot. So we did not, but they're definitely, the other thing we didn't do, of course, and I mentioned it all with the Weta Studios, is they have, what's that, the movie, the trilogy, the famous movie they did there. They have tours of every place that they filmed.
Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
That's it.
They have tours of that, so we didn't do that either.
Okay. Let's see. Charlene has a question. You want to unmute press your space bar and ask your question.
Oh, I was in Christchurch in 2001, the month after 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And I stayed with travel members there in both Australia and in New Zealand.
Yes.
And I was there for a conference, and Sir Edmund Hillary was our keynote speaker.
Wow.
And his table was just in front of ours, and our table was laughing and having a good time. And everyone was going up to him and giving him some type of a bill. So towards the middle of it, he looked back at us. He says, I think I want to join your table. You're having much more fun. And so I asked him, I said, why is everyone approaching you with money? He goes, because my picture is on their currency.
Oh.
And I felt so stupid that I didn't know that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But I didn't have I think it was a $5, their $5 bill.
And that's
I
why
didn't have one.
we all travel to learn, you know.
That exactly.
We learned on
exactly.
that trip. It was incredible.
Yeah. But the hosts were just as you explained, they took us everywhere.
Yeah. Some of them picked us up at the airport. The best story that I tell is when we came off the train at Christchurch at the end, and we had to get back to our hotel. So we're rolling our suitcases and we're trying to find the corner to get the bus to get back to the downtown. And we're going through kind of a big box mall, and we're not sure exactly how to zigzag through. And there was a lady there with her little kid in a stroller. And I said, could you tell me, where's this corner that we're going to, the best way to walk? And she says, oh, just come in the car with me. So you're going to bring strangers in your car. She opens her trunk. She realized she's not going to get her luggage in her stroller. And then she points the way. So that was like nice person number one. We get to the corner and it's a big intersection with busy streets, and we don't know which piece of the
No, but
corner to
also,
be on.
what you have to know, in New Zealand, the buses don't stop on the corners. They stop in the middle of the blocks.
So we see a runner come past us and he says, hey, where's the bus that goes into town? And he says, well, I'm not sure, but stay here. And he ran down the 4 streets to find out which street that we should go down.
So we had to go halfway down one of
He
the
ran
streets.
back to us and told us which way to walk. Like, they were amazing, totally amazing.
That's great. Let's see.
Mary.
Mary has her hand up.
Oh, thank you guys.
Get my off. I have a couple things from New Zealand. This is a letter opener. This is kauri wood you mentioned.
Yeah.
They have
Right.
the kauri forests in the northern part. They're this tan wood, really pretty. They're very tall, and they use the and very hard wood. And when the sailors came through, they made the ship masts from them.
That
So,
makes sense.
they cut down a lot of them, but you can see the fern that you were talking about.
Yep, the silver
And the
fern.
little kiwi bird, which is the national bird. And here's my, whoops, here's my little, my little kiwi.
Yeah,
He's made of possum fur. This is soft. I know it keeps doing this.
yeah.
This is soft fur on him, but he's a little kiwi bird.
Oh, that's a
They're
perfect.
nocturnal. You don't see them very often. You can see one, in a museum or nature place. Anyway, I thought you'd be interested in that.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mary.
Hmm.
Let's see. Here's a question. How many days did you travel just in New Zealand?
We did
I think we did
2
two
weeks.
weeks in New
2
Zealand.
weeks in New
That's
Zealand
2 weeks too.
and 2 weeks in Australia. Then we went to Fiji because we just wanted to relax for a few days. We were tired. So we just sort of went to an all-inclusive and just and unwound. And then to break up the long flight, we then went for a week to Los Angeles. And then the time zone got a little bit
Sandra's
better.
sister lives in Los
So we
Angeles.
kind of did it really slowly coming back for the time difference. I don't remember, at least 12 hours.
10
different.
hours or
Yeah.
something like that.
And then you went back to Canada in November?
It was, yeah, it was,
Unfortunately, yes.
it was
we-
around November 15th. And when we got back was when it went on fire. And we had made it just,
Australia went on
Australia
fire.
went on fire. We'd made it just in
We just
time,
missed it.
just missed all of that. Yeah.
We were there. I don't know if you know, there's this thing called Uluru,
Which is Ayers Rock.
Ayers
You might have
Rock,
heard that
in the
word.
middle, in the very center of Australia. And we were there on the very last day you were ever allowed to climb it.
To climb to the
They
top.
they made climbing. I was going to say if you're not
Yeah,
native,
it's a sacred rock.
but
And so
nobody
for
climbed it.
years, the Western people didn't observe what they were supposed to be doing. So then they just said, that's it, we're done. Nobody can climb anymore. And
And on that last day, there were 1,000 people
Yeah.
in line to try and climb it. We didn't.
Interesting. Okay. All right. If kiwi birds are flightless, how did they get to New Zealand?
oh, maybe they hopped on a ship or a boat with somebody. That's where a lot of weird things get places.
Is there any relationship between the kiwi birds and the kiwi fruit?
Yeah, because the kiwi fruit had a different name. It wasn't a very sellable name. So named after the bird because it was cute.
Okay. Well, if you if you held one of the little kiwi fruits, it looks very similar to the body
Right.
of
Yeah.
the bird.
Right.
So,
Well, they
uh,
call the New Zealand people kiwis as well,
Right.
Yes,
just for fun.
yes,
Exactly.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
yes.
This is my
Okay.
kiwi from traveling in New Zealand. Sometimes people ask me, who are you getting this for? And I said, for myself. But it said on it, squeeze here, and you can hear an actual true sound of the kiwi. So
Yeah.
there is the kiwi.
Yeah.
That's a
Oh, wow.
great souvenir.
It really is.
You
And when
look
did
like a
you go,
fantastic-
David?
Oh my, I'm muted. Actually, we've gone twice, in the fall of 2015, and then we went back in the spring of 2016. Actually, we took a 28-day cruise from San Francisco to Sydney, and so we cruised around New Zealand on our way to Sydney, and then we cruised back there in the fall. We did that in the spring of 2015, and then we spent an additional 3 weeks in Australia from Sydney up to the Great Barrier Reef and back. We flew home and stayed home and rested, as Sandra was saying. You get tired of travel, so we flew home for 4 months and rested up, and then flew back to Sydney and spent an additional 3 weeks from Sydney to Hobart in
It's
Tasmania.
it's an island below in the bottom of
It's south.
Australia.
Yeah.
It's part of Australia. Yeah.
Right.
Tasmania.
Yes.
Yeah. Hobart is the major city on the southern tip of Tasmania. And we stayed with some people who said, if you look south from here, the next thing you see is Antarctica. and
Right.
so after we've finished with Tasmania, we flew north to go to Melbourne and rented a car, and then just drove from Melbourne along the Great Ocean Road and then across for several days. I think it took us 8 days to drive back to Sydney. And then we took a cruise back to New Zealand and all around New Zealand and back. So we did go to Milford Sound, and we were impressed, but we didn't do the train trip that you did. And and we did go to a New Zealand winery. And we're not big wine drinkers, but I know of New Zealand wine. But it was the experience of being there. Again, how courteous the people were. They gave us taste of wine, and they told us all about their winery. And we thought that that was an interesting thing, especially coming from California, where we have vineyards and wineries within less than an hour from us. And my brother, who lives in Northern California, is surrounded by grape vineyards. So it's just a cultural thing for us.
Okay, great. Let's see. Oh.
I have my kiwi too. So my kiwi came back with me, and I went over on a quilting trip in 1988 to Australia and New Zealand for 4 weeks. My husband almost divorced me over the trip after he told me I could go. 2 weeks in each country and met with 6 quilting groups.
Oh, what
And
fun.
Then in 18, I went back for 12 weeks, 6 weeks to each country, and visited some of the quilters that I had met and been writing to for 30 years.
Wow.
Stayed with them, stayed with a nursing school classmate, had a fantastic time. But that's my kiwi, made out of special wood.
That's great. Let's see,
Yeah.
one last question, and then it's almost 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. Did you see any rugby matches? I guess anybody that's been to New Zealand.
No.
Yeah. No.
No.
I wonder though when they play rugby there. I mean,
I was there in the summer.
Yeah, I played in college, and you would have the New Zealand or Australia teams come up to America during our seasons, our summers, and then they would travel back there. So they would play year round, and they travel to the to the northern hemisphere. But they were like the best in the world. The All Blacks, were just like the best team out there.
Jack, again, that was the team's called the Blacks, correct?
ALLBLACKS, All Blacks.
Okay.
Yeah.
I happened to be in Australia when the Blacks were playing the Australian team, and they were playing actually for the World Championship in England. So they Australia team went to England, the New Zealand team went to England, and they were playing each other for the championship. And the person with whom I was staying said, Australia's going to lose. The Blacks don't lose, so we're going to lose. And sure enough, he got up like at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch the match live since it was in England. And he said, we lost. That is an interesting little side story in that the man I was staying with had a baseball on his desk. And I said, why did you happen to have a baseball? And he said, oh, at 18, I was signed by the Cleveland Indians organization to pitch for them. And I actually spent a year in Youngstown, Ohio, pitching in their minor league program. And here I am in a small town in I think it was the Sunshine Coast in Australia.
Wow, that's great. Well, you all, it's 8 o'clock, and